Hi, and good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, whenever you hear this broadcast. It's streaming live right now on StreamYard, but it will be in the archives and you'll be able to pick it up sooner or later. And this is Dave Emmons, and my show is a strange reality show. And we're on United Public Radio Network, FM 105.3 and 107.7 globally. I mean, globally, this show goes around the globe. And of course, like I said, Strange Reality. My name is Dave Emmons. Producer tonight is Joe Montaldo. He's the boss, or he keeps saying Michelle's the boss, but they're both bosses. But Joe Montaldo's producing tonight, and we really appreciate him being on board. And we were talking before the show, we were talking about UFOs and things of that nature, and some of my involvement. And Joe's a pretty knowledgeable guy in this field, and I like asking him some questions. And I was talking to him about my my little reaction or something that happened Friday morning early that actually scared the wife. The wife has known some of my activities or my experiences. She's in the Philippines now, but I told her and sent her the pictures, and it scared her. So I've got a lot of research, and I'm seeking out Joe Montaldo's expertise on this too. But let's get to our guest here tonight, R.J. Rick Teles. And he says we must remain grounded and objective in our research of Risk, the boy who cried wolf syndrome. Okay, that's a good one. Researcher and author of The Final Revelation, The Sun Project. That's a book Rick wrote. Rick has been an investigator and student of the UFO phenomenon and intelligent extraterrestrial hypotheses for over 50 years and has worked with numerous UFO groups, including NICAP, MUFON, NUFOR, and the Center for UFO Studies, as well as noted researchers as Dr. J. Allen Hynek and Stanton Friedman. I'd love to meet those guys too. During that time, he has completed over 400 investigations and numerous interviews with military and government witnesses. RJ, in which he likes to be called, that's his nickname, not nickname, but real initials to his name, has provided training on the UFO investigative process and techniques, and is a consultant to investigators in data, photo, and video analysis. He has also conducted forensic analysis of numerous high-profile historical UFO incidents, and we'll probably get into some of those. He holds a master's degree in education in computer science, specializing in areas of the information technology management. He worked as an information analyst and technical consultant on cyber defense for the government and aerospace corporations. That's interesting. It was his work in these areas that gave him access to the military and intelligence communities where he met individuals willing to share their experience in regards to the UFO phenomenon and intelligent extraterrestrial life. I've talked to Rick or Jay Teles before, and we've had a great show, and that's why I called him back on this network, because I always call back my really interesting and very knowledgeable people, and Rick Teles is one of them. Can you add anything more to that opener there, Rick?
I think that's enough. I didn't know that much about myself. Did I write all that down for you?
Yeah, you wrote it. You must forget. You must be writing at midnight and then forgetting about it.
Yeah, that's typically what happens. I don't know why, but it seems that I get started really at night. You have that thought, and you can't let it go. So,
No,
yeah, that might have been the case.
I never write after 10 p.m. That's a time I quit writing. If I'm writing on my books, and I'm writing on my fourth one now, but I quit writing about 9 o'clock, 9:30, because I think after that you start writing crazy, or you're starting to get tired and you get crazy. So no, I'm not saying that you were crazy writing that. I think that's an excellent intro,
I,
and that's
I've
and
been
that's why I
called
write.
worse, Dave. Yeah, I've been called
Okay,
worse.
okay. Tell me a little bit about yourself. How you got started in all this UFO phenomenon, and your education and everything. Rick, tell
Oh
us.
well, how I got started, it was I was about 10 years old, and I went to a movie. And my father had dropped us off, me and some friends. I went to a movie, and when we came out, I called him and said, come and get us, Dad. And there was a drugstore right there. What drugstores used to be. We went in, and
Mhm.
we were just waiting for my father to come in. There was a magazine there about UFOs. I
Right.
actually still have that magazine. I read that, and after that, I was kind of hooked. I was fascinated, and my focus always has been I want to know. I want to know what the truth is, and I started You know, back when I was like 10, it's been an avocation, all the different work that I've done. I worked in some big companies, all in technology, but always with that kind of this idea that when I had an opportunity to talk to somebody about the topic, I would. So I had a chance to gather a lot of information.
And sounds like to me that you got into this in your education and also your background in the military. I think what you wanted the title of the show, and it was really interesting. Redefining reality. How has 21st century science redefined the UFO phenomenon? Can you start us off on that thought? What you were thinking, Rick?
Yeah, I keep looking at that, and in some cases, new technology has provided us with some explanations of what had been. We had some infamous cases in the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s, and we kind of know what they are now. On the other hand, new technology has been unable to explain some of the infamous cases that we had. I'll mention some of them. So it makes them even more mysterious. I mean, we know that some of the cases now from the 50s and 60s, they were U-2s, they were SR-71 spy planes. GE had a satellite system where they would take photographs, and because the communications to transmit photographs from space to ground wasn't very good, the satellite would actually come back to Earth. People would see that happen. Of course, we have stealth now, and we have drones, which all make it kind of difficult. At the same time, with all this technology that we have and things we can look at, there's still some incidences that we cannot be explained and have not been explained. And some of my favorites are the incident at Exeter. That was, 1964. Mm-hmm. We have the Malmstrom and Minot cases where the UFO actually took nuclear missiles offline. We have Rendlesham Forest and Bentwaters in England. These have not been explained. And I've spoken to a lot of military people about them. So technology is starting to help us to understand. I mentioned something before we go on the air. There's some other stuff we can talk about. But the impact of now the quantum theory and quantum physics. It's starting to take some of the stuff that people considered either spiritual or science fiction, and it's brought it into the realm of science. So we have to start considering it. It was funny, back in the 70s, I think it was in the 70s he said it, J. Allen Hynek. He said, it can't be, therefore it isn't. And pretty much that was what the military, the government was using as a response to any questions about UFOs. It just doesn't exist. But that's kind of changed. And I think with new technology and new science and what we're learning about the universe, the taboo about speaking about things like UFOs and extraterrestrials is kind of going away. Not completely, but it's kind of going away. And people's reluctance to talk about it, at least based on my experience, because I'm having more and more people ask me questions all the time, is starting to go away. And I think that's the result of our science kind of catching up to some of these stories that we had in the past.
Well, you still have some hardcore groups that just don't want to believe, or they don't want to. They think it's against their beliefs. And you have a lot of religious and fundamentalists that are believing in that way. You mentioned the UK, some of these Exeter and some of these other stories. I got a guy named Gary Jones. Mm-hmm. Do you know him? He's a writer. He's going to be on this show in about a week or two, a couple of weeks. And he's with Philip Mantle and the publishing company there. And Philip Mantle turns out some good writers publishing those people. And they mentioned some of the stories you just did about UK. And
Rendlesham Forest, Bentwaters is very interesting. I don't know, most people are familiar with it. The Bentwaters and Rendlesham Forest, the Bentwaters Air Force Base was a joint base with the British, but it housed nuclear weapons, and the United States Air Force was responsible for it. And as the story goes, one night they had this sighting of an odd object over actually the storage areas, and then it appeared to, I'm kind of simplifying this, it appeared to drop down in the woods. Some air police went out to take a look at it, and what they found was a craft that they said was not of this world. I've spoken to some of them. One actually said that he touched it, and it had a smooth, pebbled finish, but it was very smooth. He says, but it was cold. So it's never been explained. There's been a few stories that come out about it, but it's really never been explained, and they don't want to really talk about it. Now, I just want to go back to something else you said, and this comes up every time I do a presentation. a lot of people don't want to believe this, and the question is why. And the reason they don't want to believe is that they've been taught not to believe. Most people, and for even scientists, there's a theory that if our science can't define it, then it can't exist. Okay, and that's called anthropocentric sovereignty, and that's based on a paper written by Alexander Wendt and Raymond Duval. Wendt is from Ohio State, and Duval was from the University of Minnesota. And basically, they said this is our human nature in this country. If it can't be defined by our science, then it can't exist. But then again, there's a lot of things that can't be defined by our science, but do exist. So if it can't be defined by our science, it must be superstition, religion, or conspiracy theory. And that's not true, because for many years there were things, something as simple as rogue waves couldn't be defined by our science, but we know they exist. So when I talk to people about that, then they sort of say, well, yeah. I said, so as we go through the session, don't use that as an argument to me, because I'm going to ask you a question. And they say, well, what's the question? I'm going to say, when is the next earthquake going to hit? Where and at what magnitude? And they're going to say, well, nobody can tell you that. I said, I know that. I said, so don't say that you can tell me what's going on a light year, 10 light years, or 1,000 light years from here, because you can't even tell me what's going to happen on our planet.
Yeah, the scientists are working on that. They're trying to develop a method and procedure about earthquakes and that type of thing, but I'm not quite so sure that they're getting there, just like you said. And that's why I enjoyed you on the last show we had, because you put in a lot of logic and a lot of scientific stuff, and you tie in with the UFO phenomenon. But that's something that I guess we all need to know. We need to know both sides of it, the scientific community side of it, in which they're still saying they don't want to really admit it. But you have places like, or shows like Skinwalker Ranch with that Travis, who's a physicist. I mean, they're getting, NASA people are getting involved after they retire. They're getting involved in some of this research, and I think I like that. And I think that's something that's. Is that what you're seeing that is turning into a positive thing, Rick?
Yeah, I am. And I mean, the problem that we have with this is, it's like a lot of things. The subject is what they call unfalsifiable, or what I call axiomatic. We can't prove it. We can't disprove it. So we have to use inductive reasoning. We have to use facts that aren't exact, but we call them cogent. Right. They make sense when you put them together. And that's why some of this other stuff that we've looked at, like I'm saying, one thing that science has done for us, without a doubt, has validated the existence of extraterrestrial life. I haven't met too many people who don't believe that there is someone or something out there somewhere. That's kind of gone. I mean, trillions of galaxies, hundreds of trillions of stars, and around those stars there's planets. To believe that there's not some type of intelligent life, whatever it may be, in one of those is almost statistically impossible.
Right. And you mentioned something about here, the U-2 SR-71 satellites and drones. Some of these things provide explanations of a lot of this. Did the SR-71 or the U-2 spy plane, did they see things? Have you heard anything about that?
Well, I haven't heard about them seeing it. Pilots have always seen things, and yeah, they've had some stories. You don't hear a lot of them. The problem is people saw those aircraft in the air. Now, I saw an SR-71 flying. It was interesting because it was off the coast. And if you know what the shape of the plane is, it's long and thin. Yeah. All right, it looks like a giant X-15. And as you see it flying, and it's moving very fast, it looks very thin. Okay, and it can turn very quickly. And when it turns, all you see are the two engines, looks like balls. Okay, and I can see where somebody could see that turn very quickly and say, oh, that long cylindrical shape turned into two balls and it disappeared. Well, okay. On the other hand, there are things out there that can't be explained as simply as that, and those are the ones we still want answers to. And it's interesting that in the latest report to Congress, the AARO, Sean Kirkpatrick, head of the All-Domain Aerial Resolution Office, he kind of backtracked on a few things there. And one of them is they were going to look at some of the older cases. And at one point, they mentioned the missile bases. Now they're saying they're only going back to 1996. Well, the most interesting ones go back a little bit farther, because you can't You can't kind of explain them as drones or other types of information. That would be Malmstrom. That would be Minot. That would be Rendlesham Forest, which is in the 80s.
Right. Now, you mentioned, I guess, what's going on. This deep space stuff, impact of Hubble, Kepler, and James Webb, and the discovery of exoplanets and trillions of galaxies. Just last week, I saw Michio Kaku. He was talking about that they have seen deep into space, and they might have to redefine or rewrite the history books on the Big Bang. Did you catch any of that?
Yeah, I saw that, and I think he's absolutely right. A couple of things happened in the last few weeks, maybe more than that. One is they found two galaxies that shouldn't exist. Okay, now remember, we know everything there is to know.
Yeah.
But they found two galaxies that can't possibly exist. They're reconsidering the Big Bang theory because what it might be is multiple Big Bangs. And when you start to get into quantum physics and the way it works, that makes perfect sense, because if everything is made out of energy, as quantum physics, without going into the detail of quantum physics, suggests, then the energy could have existed forever. And we don't really know what forever means. We can't comprehend that. So the Big Bang could have essentially been a star collapsing upon itself and then boom. And that's what they're starting to talk about.
Well, I think, as a God-fearing person, I mean, I believe in God and the creator and the source, and I think a lot of the ETs do also. They say that this, a little bit about quantum theory and you studied some of this stuff. Let me ask you a couple of questions about this. In the center of everything, there's a big ball of light, blaring light. That must be God, or the infinite universe. And they say when light comes out, and it may not have been a Big Bang, but when light comes out from that huge source, when light slows down, it turns into matter. Is that true, Rick?
I don't know if that's true. I know that all matter is made up of energy. Okay, so when you talk to me about light is energy, and light is probably the purest form of energy that we're going to find. And yes, I agree, somewhere there's a creator. Who that creator is or what that creator is, I don't think we know. I like to make a point, I was brought up Catholic. I went to Catholic schools, Catholic colleges, but there is a difference between religion and God.
Yes.
Okay.
Big difference.
There's a big difference, but there is a creator. And, I learned, that's one of the things I learned over a number of years in doing this is, one is, this didn't happen by accident. I sit outside and I'm sitting in my wife's garden, which is all over the place. And these plants, I swear they're going to eat me at some point. But I'm looking at them and I'm looking how the leaf is structured. And I'm looking at this and I'm saying, that doesn't happen by accident. It just doesn't. Okay. Another thing I learned too is never say never. All right. And there's a thing called lure of completeness. And scientists especially, and a lot of people, we find something. Like when we first discovered the atom and how the atom breaks down and the piece, that's it. That's the end. That's as far as it goes. Well, we were wrong. Things are smaller. We get into quantum world, they're smaller than that. They're tiny, tiny. Okay. So we got to be careful for all of that. We got to be careful to say, well, one, I do believe this was all created by somebody or something. But two, I think we have a lot to learn before we can understand what's going on. And I think one thing that came out of quantum theory, and you've heard a lot of people talk about it, which is the multiverse. And I don't subscribe to the multiverse, and there's a reason for that. I subscribe to multi-dimensions. And I believe that the universe is multidimensional. Okay, and these dimensions could be right next to each other.
Right.
They can bump into each other. Right. They can overlap. Okay, it's all based on.
Are you saying that you're changing the name of the universe to a dimension?
Well, the universe itself exists, but then within the universe are dimensions. Okay, where did I put it here? I have my new teaching aid that I'm going to be using in one of my cases. This is like let's say we pull out a chunk of the universe. This is a square little thing. This is kind of a warped Rubik's Cube. But if all these are dimensions, these colors that we see are dimensions, in space they can move and they can warp and they can change. Okay, and I think by doing this, what we're going to start doing is we're going to start making the connection between spirituality and science.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I believe in dimensional because I've been told that people saw reports that supposedly came from a higher source at one point that told us that the universe is dimensional. But when we start to talk about dimensional, we can explain a lot of things. We can explain paranormal events as not so much a spiritual, more of a scientific incident where two dimensions could have actually rubbed against each other, or there could be a break in one where you can see to the other side, or the other side can see into this side. Mm-hmm. And as you listen to quantum theory and you get deeper into it and how everything works and the energy, it starts to make a lot of sense.
Rick, what I posed to a lot of people as guests, that what is the difference between a poltergeist, a ghost, an ET, or some dimensional being or spirit or an angel? They're extraterrestrial because they're coming from another dimension to here. All of them, right?
Well, and I think that's correct. And it's interesting because years ago, J. Allen Hynek, before he died, he started postulating that maybe what we're dealing with here is a dimensional situation rather than an extraterrestrial situation. But I didn't understand what he was saying at the time. But now I do understand, with the help a little bit of quantum theory, is we may be dealing with extraterrestrials that may be able to manipulate dimensions to do their travel. Yes, we're dealing with a dimensional being. Mm-hmm. We have the same thing with angels. We could have the same thing with ghosts. These are scientific entities. They're not spiritual, but they're made up of energy, and they're within a dimension that holds energy differently or structures energy differently. And the interesting thing about some of them, and when you get into dimensions and people see balls of light and people see different things, not all people, but there's a thing known as mind remediation metaphors. And what that is when you get into a stressful situation or a situation where you don't know what's going on, you get confused, you create a metaphor that you have in your mind to explain something. So a lot of us might explain certain types of light or certain beings as angels because we see them that way. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're alien. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're truly angels. I never say never. I told you that before.
Right. I just wrote a book on angels that just released last Friday. But I got into a lot of biblical studies that they claim that the Bible is loaded with extraterrestrial involvement.
Well, they are. And again, I believe. And Giorgio Tsoukalos, I like him. Okay, yeah. I like him a lot.
I like his hair.
I like his hair, but he does make sense.
Yeah.
But like he said, this is a frame of reference thing. Back then, what are you going to call a ball of light or something flying through the sky? You don't know what an airplane is, and you don't know what a rocket is, but you know what a chariot is. Mm-hmm. So you're going to say flaming chariot. And like he said, these people weren't stupid. They knew they saw something and they described it the best way they could. And I think the mind remediation metaphor is the same type of thing even today. Certain people see things, they don't know what it is, so they describe it the best they can. So we have to kind of ask the questions to try and figure out what was it? Was it something to be concerned about or not? I think it holds a lot of possibilities.
Right. Now, the Hadron Collider, mm-hmm. they have found the God particle, and you were talking about particles that are so small that they're quantum particles, whatever. Do you think they're hiding things from us? I've heard they found some things going on. They're not letting us in on it. What do you think, Rick? Have you heard anything with your military intelligence people?
I mean,
all right.
When you say hiding things, there's
hiding
things.
Information, yes.
Well, I think there's a certain amount of information that's being hidden, and I don't know if I mentioned this to you before, but that's a very tricky thing with the military. I mean, some people will say, it's a conspiracy. They don't want us to know. Well, you have to realize that the average, and I don't mean average, just an average person, but the average soldier or airman or whatever, they have a job to protect us. That they take an oath to that. So if they're told that they have a piece of information that's important not to reveal because it's national security, then they're not going to do it. They're not part of any conspiracy. They're just doing their job, trying to protect us. Then, of course, I'm less, I'm more dubious, I guess, with legislative type of people and that type of thing, administrative. There's certainly information I think has been hidden. I think Roswell is a case of that. The fact that a lot of the stuff that was talked about at Roswell is now actually coming to fruition. And people have asked me, why didn't we hear about this before? Why did they have it not say anything? Because we didn't understand what it was.
Okay, there's so many layers to that Roswell story, Rick. What is the final layer that you could see, or what has come out that has really revealed itself in the past few years with all this research? Have you found out anything, Rick?
I think the thing with memory metals, I mean, where did they come from? We have things like memory metals. We have what we call engineered living materials that that can repair themselves and grow. We can make aircraft out of them. I think there's a lot of stuff that came out of Roswell. Superman memory crystals, or what they call Superman memory crystals, nuclear diamond batteries. Mm-hmm. One of my favorites is gravity wave communications, and that was part of the AATIP. A number of years ago, when we wrote the book, I said that I believe that looking for radio waves was kind of a waste of time because extraterrestrials are not going to communicate if they're advanced using a radio wave. A guy by the name of Silvano Colombano, he's a doctor of, I think is it astronomy? Anyway, he's with NASA, and he wrote a paper a couple of years ago, and he said the same thing. He did not believe that we're looking in the right place, that extraterrestrials would not use simple radio communications, even though they might be out there. But something like gravity wave communications, well, we've proven that they're real. We've proven in the lab that wormholes can exist. One thing that I thought was interesting is I always wondered, could a black hole be a wormhole? And all of a sudden I read, yeah, maybe it is. But I think you look at Roswell, another thing that I like, and I heard and was told to me many times, was that the aliens that were found, or gray aliens, are not aliens. Okay, they're probes, they're robots, whatever we want to call them. They're biomechanical robots. Yeah. Mm-hmm. They are the perfect space travelers. We're getting to the point where we're creating the same type of technology. We're using DNA to create processors. We're creating our own skin. We're creating nanobots that can think. So really, we're kind of proving that technology is possible.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of scientific stuff that it's being invented, and people are coming across with all these different ideas. They've got to be coming from somewhere. Do you think that we have some kind of a mutual agreement with the ETs, the military, and the scientific community, Rick?
Well, I know what I was told. I was told that there is a form of communication. It's called an arm's length. They called it. The men who spoke to me said it's an arm's length type of communication. They come to us when they want to. We can't get to them necessarily. Okay. Originally, it was done, and this is what I was told. Back in the late 40s and 50s, it was done through a thing called the bat phone. They named it the bat phone. And what it was they described it to me as a black box. And there was something in it, but they didn't know what it was. And the best way they could describe it to me today is it kind of worked on what we use today as Bluetooth. And they could put this box near a teletype, and the teletype would type out information. And the information, at least in the beginning that were given, were concepts. They would never give an answer. They would never give the whole story. They'd give you a concept and then expect us to figure it out, which to me sounded like an experiment. Like, we're going to tell you human beings this, and let's see if you can figure it out. But that's what I was told. And there are documents that explain certain things, give us certain hints. But it was always arm's length, despite what we've heard from other people. It wasn't like we're going to meet with them, sit down at a table and talk to them.
Mm-hmm. I know last time I talked to you, we were talking about the different races of ETs, I guess, that could be working with the military. And also, like Dr. David Jacobs always bring up his name, and of course, Professor Mack. But these guys tell us that these ETs are walking amongst us. They're humanoids. Either that, they are shapeshifters. They're in government, they're in big banking, they actually run this world from all indications. And of course, the reptilians being noted as being the bad guys. You've heard from military people and intelligence people, and you've worked with them, and you talked to a few of them. Could you tell us, Rick, what you learned from some of these people?
Yeah, they first we start with, and I always do this in presentations, we need to dispel the image of aliens that Hollywood has put out there. Okay. And the minute we do that, it starts to make a whole lot more sense. And primarily what we're dealing with is people that look just like us. Okay. Uh, Michael Rennie in The Day the Earth Stood Still. That's an alien. Okay. Yeah, the people that we heard about, Samjas and these people, they're humanoid. They look like us. And that's why some people believe that they're actually related to us. That's what they tell me, that we're dealing with. And yes, they said they have been here, probably have been here for thousands of years, and it is more than likely that they live among us today in all walks of life. And they said there are hybrids that were created, and they said the code name for them were mutts. They called them mutts, and the reason they called them mutts is because they're mongrels. They're a combination. But they said they're virtually indistinguishable from human beings. Now, one interesting story that I heard, and again, this is a story that I heard, but it came from a pretty good source, is that I believe it was in California. One of these mutts were killed in a car accident. Okay, and this doesn't happen apparently very much. But anyway, they brought this person to a hospital, and at that hospital, in the trauma ward, was a former Air Force flight surgeon who apparently knew something about this. He took one look at this, and he stopped everything, and he called the authorities, whoever that might be. They came in, they took the body, and they gave the excuse that there was a disease or something they're concerned about, that they had to take the body away, and they took the body away. And the rest of the teams there, the trauma teams, are told, just don't talk about it. It's a security issue. This person was something or some other, and they were gone. And I thought that was interesting because I heard it from a couple of different people who were not connected. So I thought that was kind of interesting to hear that. Again, it's a story that was told to me. I can't prove it. I can't disprove it, but I trust the people who tell me explicitly.
What was the most alarming? What was so alarming about this body?
Well, there was really nothing, but apparently this flight surgeon could tell the difference. Okay. I don't know how. They didn't know how because they said, we're not doctors. We don't know how he told the difference on that, but he did. He knew immediately when he saw them or saw this body that it was not a normal human being. Now, maybe he made a mistake. Maybe he didn't. Maybe what they said was true, but
being an Air Force colonel, he might know some inside.
Yeah, he was a colonel, and he was a former flight surgeon. Yeah.
Now, do a lot of these hybrids or these mutts, Rick? Do they have a mission? Do they have a purpose? Do you think?
That's a good question. I believe, and I've been led to believe that the mission is to study, is to learn, is to understand. Doing the same type of thing that we're doing. I mean, we're going to Mars and we're studying, we're learning. We're trying to go to outer planets and we're studying and we're learning. What is so hard to believe that there could be an advanced race doing the same thing, but they've found us and now they're studying? I believe that they're studying because this is a big experiment. I do believe that after listening to people, watching what goes on, listening to stories, looking at, here's a question I ask people a lot. What does the human race contribute to the life cycle of the Earth? What do we contribute?
Nothing.
Not a thing.
Yeah.
We're a consumer. I don't want to call us parasites, but that's the term. You look at an earthworm, it turns over the dirt. You look at a shark, it cleans the ocean. It's a scavenger. Even some of the smallest bacteria, they all have a purpose. We really don't. Almost as if we don't belong here, or we aren't supposed to be here, or we were put here for some reason. Some people get very upset when I ask that question. They give me some type of facile answer, not well thought out, but they get upset. They get mad. And I'm saying, I don't know what the answer is. I'm just asking the question.
Do these hybrids actually know they're hybrids, or are they just going through life as a typical human being?
They know.
They know.
They know. They know.
And do
They
they
must have.
report?
I would guess they have some type of handler, as we
Mhm.
would say in the spy business, somebody that they can communicate. They do know.
Mhm.
Now, and this is the thing that makes all these stories, even your story, interesting. These people can work in hospitals. These people could work at the local grocery store. They know about us. Okay. It wouldn't seem that they would need to do anything unusual to gather information. There's also a thing called, and lately it has been considered as real, and they're starting to prove this as shared consciousness and telepathic coupling. Psychology and psychiatry has proven that shared consciousness can happen. They've seen it in deathbed visions, where somebody near the deathbed sees the vision that the dying person sees. Quantum physics kind of supports this idea of minds connecting.
Mhm.
So we have shared consciousness and telepathic coupling. And I thought it was interesting that came out because I heard about things like this years ago when I was told that these aliens can see as we see, feel as we feel. All right. And that could be the telepathic coupling. The shared consciousness is interesting because they were saying how some people feel like they're possessed and it's a possession and it concerns them. And other people feel other things happen to them. But there are a number of people who recognize it for what it is. It is a shared consciousness with something. And they kind of live with it. I don't know if they talk to people about it or psychiatry or psychologists, but I heard that they learn to live with it and they understand that there is something seeing what they see, feeling what they feel, and they don't really have a problem with it because it's not really harmful.
Right. Could this be like you go back to Tesla and you go back to Einstein and Werner von Braun? They all say we got the information from up there. And could this be the coupling that you're talking about, the telepathic coupling?
It very well could be. I mean, the more I read, the more I learn. The telepathic coupling, even the remote viewing, we're starting to learn is a fairly real thing. And shared consciousness, we already know that cells communicate using electromagnetic fields. We know that. Okay, it's called radio bio. And now they're starting to believe that our brains do the same thing. Now, not everybody's attuned to it. We could be, but not everybody is attuned to it. But it is possible to be connected to other people. Now you come up with things like quantum entanglement.
Yeah.
Okay, that could be quantum entanglement and non-locality could in fact be shared consciousness or telepathic coupling. Okay, we feel as they feel as we feel, they see as we see. We don't completely understand all the different aspects of quantum entanglement. We just know that two pieces of matter, however we want to describe that, can be connected. What happens to one happens to the other.
Right. They've done an experiment here a while back. I guess it's been some time back. They're probably more advanced now than what they're telling us or what we've been hearing. But they've done that with two petri dishes with a DNA
Yeah.
that was 500 or 1,000 miles apart. And they've
Yeah.
done something to one part of it, and then the other one responded accordingly to the same, I guess, sensitivity or whatever that they were doing with it.
They've pretty much proved that it exists. Now, there's one thing that I heard that to me was a little disturbing, but I don't know if it's true, is there is a concern at one point that the Chinese may have somehow been able to use quantum entanglement to communicate with a satellite that they have. Now, if that's true, that could be very troubling because now that type of communication cannot be interfered with, and it's instantaneous. All right.
I've been told, Rick, from several sources that actually, and I just had a guy on the show last week, pretty knowledgeable about this world political thing, and some of them were saying that the Chinese aren't as advanced as they say. They just have a big propaganda program, and that the U.S. is still like 10 years plus ahead of them technology-wise.
In some ways, that might be true. That brings to mind my father. Years ago, when this is back in the 60s, and you used to see the Mayday parades, the Soviet Mayday parades with all these missiles.
Mm-hmm.
And my father used to say, Ricky, those aren't real. They're fakes. And I said, but they're putting them out there. He goes, no, they're fakes. Well, we learned after the fall of the Iron Curtain that in the 50s, when we thought they had all these missiles, they had 5.
Yeah.
They had 5 missiles.
Just
That's
like
all
Russia.
they had. So that could be true. I mean, it's possible. It could be true.
Right, but they do have satellites. They do have space things going on. We know that, but we're talking about. Actually, I've heard that there's been some satellite wars going on out there where
That's been going on for years.
Yeah, we disable each other's satellites. And if we knew it down here on the ground, we'd probably think that's an act of war, wouldn't
Well,
we, Rick?
well, we would, and that's been going on for years, disabling each other's satellites. There's different ways to do it. A burst of laser. There's different things, but you bring up something interesting. Yes, if we did it here on on Earth or down on the ground, yeah, it might be an act of war. There's another area where they're doing the same thing. It has nothing to do with UFOs, but in the cyber world. And one of the biggest issues, and this was, I did this 20 years ago, but
Hmm.
when this was going on, one question always was, when does a cyber attack constitute a kinetic response? Okay, that means a physical, we're going to bomb somebody. And the question is, if somebody was to come in and use a cyber attack to disable all our power plants, would that require a kinetic response? And that's been a concern for years. At what point do the missiles start flying because of a cyber attack? And it happened every day, every minute, everywhere. So,
Wouldn't we retaliate like in kind? We would
yeah,
send
typically you do.
a cyber attack at them, just like we've been fighting with computer viruses and wars
Yeah.
for the last few years. We've been responding in kind. I got to ask you a question. You talked about this this gravity wave. I
Communication.
had something happen to me. Now I'll have to come out and tell the story. I was talking to Joe about it, getting information from him too. But it happened about 12:30 at night, sitting on the edge of my bed. All of a sudden, I felt this kind of like waving type situation coming at me like this, and the room was actually moving around, and the TV was moving from one corner to the other, and it was kind of like vertigo, but it wasn't vertigo because I didn't feel upset in my stomach. I didn't. It wasn't a heart thing. I felt my heart was okay. It wasn't racing or anything. But when I was looking around, I saw everything just moving like in waves or whatever. And then, of course, the next day, I found all these holes and scratches in my legs, in which I've had a lot of experiences. Rick, I think I'm going to talk to you about it. And I met some of these humanoid ETs also, and I got them in my book. But I am a firm believer that something they hit you with something. It's some kind of magnetic, or could it be a gravity wave? Could you explain the difference between the two, Rick?
It could be gravity wave, but you'd feel a gravity wave differently because it's more of a wave. There are such things as psychotronic weapons, and they use things like electromagnetic fields,
Mm-hmm.
electromagnetic radiation to disorient people. We know we have weapons today using microwaves that can be used on the battlefield, which will
Yes.
disorient the enemies. The thing about the psychotronic weapons is they can be used. I don't know that they are. I'm not telling anybody that this is what's happening, but I know that they can be used through things like cell phones. They can put those signals through a cell phone. It can be done almost anywhere. I'm not saying it's being done. I'm just saying it can be done.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so you can have that type of thing. When you have a situation like what you have, the first thing I would need to know is where you live. Where you live. Is it microwave? Could it be microwave? Could it be that type of thing? And I need to know what you did before it happened. There's a certain amount of information I need to know. And here's why I
Well,
say that.
yeah. Being a journalist, though, Rick, I wait for the second shoe to drop, and the next day I noticed on my leg that there was a series of holes that were put in my leg,
See, and
and I've had pictures 4 times in the past 10 years of this happening 4 times.
that's the interesting part.
Yeah.
That's the part you have to really consider.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as where it came from, let me ask you a question. Okay, and I always ask this question. If it's extraterrestrial, here we have these people so far advanced that they can either travel through interstellar space or they can travel through dimensions. Okay, why would they do something like that? Why would they use an invasive procedure when we wouldn't even use that? We could get the information we want from CAT scans. We could get the information we want from ultrasound. We could prick a finger and get a blood drop and get what we want. We have diabetic tools today that people put on their skin, and we can get all that information.
Mm-hmm.
Why? And if we had shared consciousness and telepathic coupling, all that information is available without being invasive. So why would an advanced race do that when we wouldn't have to? Why would they be so backwards, I'm saying, to do something like that? So my guess is it's something other than extraterrestrial.
So you don't want to come out and say it, but it's maybe our military practicing, I guess, what you call I guess, I don't know how to say it. I don't want
I,
to say it really. Uh,
again, there's a lot of information I would need to know. I
yeah,
don't know of them doing that. At least in the past, there have been some odd experiments done. I mean, there's a whole town in Northern California that had some odd things done to it years ago.
mhm.
Um, Again, your location can play a big role in that. I've heard people next to test facilities and bases that have had odd things happen to them.
I'm not near a
Um,
base. Yeah.
yeah, this thing with the what do they call it? They had it at all the embassies with their heads. I forgot what they call that. They're trying to say, well, no, that whatever happened to these people wasn't a result of some type of electronic means or whatever. Well, I don't believe that, and those people
It,
don't believe
it was
something.
targeted microwave, right?
Yeah, something hit them. I don't believe it's just too coincidental that too many people had it and too many just happened to be embassies. So it's either something that was aimed at them or something we're doing within the embassy with some type of technology that probably or may not be safe. So,
Well, to bring up this show, Skinwalker Ranch, there's been several guys that's been hit with this energy. It could be microwave, whatever. They've had head trauma. They took them to the
I saw
hospital.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting that they've had like a bulge in their scalp and they've had a little head trauma from this energy that they've been hit with. And that kind of reminds me of what these guys in Cuba and actually here in the States, in
Yeah.
the embassies. Is it back engineered stuff from the ETs that we're
It very
using?
well could be. I mean, what we supposedly learned about electromagnetic fields. At one point there was no such thing as electromagnetic wave, nor was there such a thing as a gravity wave, even though Einstein, theorized that there was such thing as gravity waves. Remember, gravity as a wave, or gravity as a wave didn't exist in Newtonian laws of gravity, but Einstein believed in it. Well, it wasn't until a few years ago that we actually, number one, NASA said they heard a gravity wave. Then they saw a gravity wave actually kick a black hole out of a galaxy. So we now know that they exist, and there's a lot that can be done with them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but you got to remember the strongest force in the universe, as far as we know, is electromagnetic fields.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I believe there's a lot. I was told that the basis of extraterrestrial flight or propulsion was based on gravity waves and electromagnetic fields. So
How would it make a person feel? I know I call it dumbed down. I've been dumbed down several times where you just sit there and you can look, but you can't talk. You just observe and everything is just okay. Don't pick up a ball bat, don't pick up a weapon, sit there and just observe. That's happened to me several times in my experiences. And what is that, Rick? What kind
well,
of energy are they using for that?
that could be any number of things if that's the case. I mean, the first thing you're going to feel with high electromagnetic fields, that type of thing, you're going to feel some disorientation. That's one thing, and that's what you're talking about. I mean, if it gets severe, it's going to go on. You're going to feel lethargic. Now, with some of the microwaves, you actually start to feel warm.
Yeah.
You feel disoriented, and you'll feel warm. So it could be my guess on most of the psychotronic weapons that I've heard about. They're all electromagnetic field based type of things or microwaves, but they're electromagnetic type
Right.
of technology.
Well, this only lasted about 7 minutes early Friday morning about, the room moving around and everything. I kind of knew what was going on, that I had visitors because I'm used to that throughout my life. I've had so many things happen to me. That's why the wife is scared to death now that I've proven after several years that the same scars were shown. They were happened to me 4 times in the last 10 years. So it could be somebody else other than ETs. I know Joe Montaldo, who's an expert on a lot of UFO and ET stuff. We were talking, and he was telling me similar things. I mean, they wouldn't leave holes or marks. A lot of abductees have marks on them and scratches on them. Can you explain that, Rick?
Well, I don't know that is an ET thing. I think that's a dimensional thing. And again, I don't know any of this, but I think there are dimensions where there are people, animals, and things that, just like we have here, that you cross over, you get scratched, you get whatever. That's just a thought that I have. My whole thing is means and motive. Okay. What's the motive in leaving something like that? And besides that, the means. Why would you use those means when you're so advanced? You don't need to. I mean, that to me, that's the thing that puzzles me the most. Okay, is there's no reason to leave that. Plus the fact that they have, if they do communicate telepathically, share consciousness, they could wipe that memory away. I mean, we can do that today. Unless they want you to know for some reason. That's the only answer that I can come up with, that they want you to know for some reason. But I keep going back to, and I hear this, and I've been involved in a ton of abductions. They keep describing medical techniques of the day. When I hear about invasive probes, I'm saying, what, the aliens don't know about ultrasound? Well, they wanted to know if I was pregnant. Well, we don't even do that anymore. We don't use a probe to see if you're pregnant, except if there's a problem with the baby. We might do a amniocentesis, but we use ultrasounds. We use CAT scans. We can now, from a prick of your finger of blood, tell a whole lot about you. So why would an advanced race do that?
Good question. That is a good question. Makes me think. I have had a couple of marks on me that I know that had to be done by ETs. I had a little red hole, just a little red hole that had an implant on it in my left calf. And these marks are all done on my left leg. I've talked to a lot of, I guess, investigators. Daryl Sims, he would say that a lot of the implants and everything happens on the left side of the body. I guess that's the heart flow, or the heart side of the body. Maybe that's why they're doing it. But the only thing I've experienced that was very minor or minute was a little red hole in my calf, and then a little red cut laser line in my testicle when I was a young kid, about 14 years old. And that little red laser line had to have been ET, because that's what they were doing. They put an implant in there, and they put an implant in my leg, and that was a little red hole. And you're correct. I'm starting to put this together where, yes, there has to be some other motive for leaving marks on you.
There has to be another motive. I'm going to throw something else at you, and we were talking about how science has explained some things to us. Nanotechnology.
Mm-hmm.
Nanotechnology has been used in medicine now for a number of years. Okay, and these things are so small, you drink them, you swallow them, and that's it. Or it goes into your bloodstream, and now they can tell things from those nanotechnologies. They're so tiny, you don't even know they're there. Okay, and they're continuing to use them more and more. We're going to be able to actually cure things using nanotechnology, or predict things using nanotechnology. That's us.
Yeah.
Now tell me about an advanced race.
Yeah. If the powers to be lets us. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Would an advanced race not have the same technology? And in fact, is it possible that we got those ideas? It seems that every now and then our technology just takes this huge leap. I mean, we went from transistors to ion gates to boom, boom, boom. Those are some pretty big leaps. And yes, we do progress, but you have to wonder, like Corso said, that Colonel Corso said he gave this information out. He gave this material out. People didn't really know what it was or where it came from, but they studied it. Things like the fishing wire, which ended up being, fiber optics, that type of thing.
Right.
You have to wonder. But when I hear those stories, number one, like I said to you, I have to understand now what the motive must be, because the technology is there not to do that. I didn't know if you were going to bring it up, but I've been seeing all the things about cattle mutilations.
Yeah, it's going to bring that up. You read my mind.
Okay.
I want to take a station ID break real quick.
Okay.
You're listening to United Public Radio Network, FM 105.3 and 107.7 globally, and it's from beautiful New Orleans. And this is the Strange Reality Show with Dave Emmons, and producer tonight is Joe Montalvo. And my guest tonight is Mr. Rick. Yes, yes, Mr. Rick. What is it, RJ? You want to go by that?
No, you can call me Rick.
Okay, just Rick Teles. Okay, I'd like to call you RJ. I always like nicknames.
You can call me anything you want. The only thing is, if you call me Richard, I figured I'm in trouble because Dunzall would call me Richard when I got in trouble, and so did my mother.
I never knew my real name when I was a kid. It's always fat, so and so, this and that, always chubby kid. So you're always called. My brother, I don't think he's ever called me by my real name up until the last 10 years, and we're pretty old now. So okay, RJ, Rick, tell us a little bit about what we're getting into this thing. Why do they leave Mark? I think sometimes they want us to know something, right?
Well, and that falls into the theory of this is an experiment.
Mm-hmm.
If they wanted you to know something, why? To see a reaction? To see how we would react? To see what we might do? That would tend to push me in the direction that everything that's happening here is an experiment. We're put here, things happen, how do we react? Now, to what end? I couldn't tell you. But yeah, I mean, that's the only thing that I can think of, is to see what our reaction would be, how we might deal with it.
How about lucid regress dreams? I've had several of those that were very real, and I never forget them. I don't even have to write them down.
The vivid lucid dreams,
right.
That's one big thing. We have missing time. I've seen that. I recently read some stuff about sleep paralysis, how they explain it, and almost everybody has had it to some extent, but it has to do with REM sleep and your body. And what happens, they believe, is that when you go to REM sleep, your brain shuts your body down. And when you wake up, you slowly wake up, you come out of the REM sleep, your brain starts your body up again, and you're fine. But on occasion, what happens is you come out of REM sleep before the body has been restarted. So you can't move. Now, that doesn't mean that people don't have situations where something happens to them and they feel like they're pinned to the bed or something's going on. That's not to say that. It's just saying there are possible explanations, so we have to be careful. We also have autokinesis, which a lot of people aren't familiar with, but it happens particularly in a dark sky when there's no other frames of reference. Your eyes at a distance, what they start to do is they move, they wobble. So it can make it look like something out in a distance is actually flashing. So as we get these, we have to kind of assess each one as to what it was, when it happened. And the vivid dreams, I hear from a lot of people, in the lucid dreams, they can't forget them. Right, and they're very real.
You don't have to write them down now.
You do not. And then you get into the mind metaphor remediation. Did I dream that because of some type of stress, and then I had to create an image so that I could remember it? I don't know. Because like I said to you before, is you never say never.
Right.
This is a question of, why do these things happen? We started to talk about cattle mutilations. Again, I know what some of the early ones were. I mean, I was told that, and they know what they were.
Can I tell you, and then maybe you can correct me or add on to it? I think cattle mutilations, there's a lot of humanoid beings in the galaxy and also in the universe. I think they're actually taking DNA from what we eat. We eat cattle and livestock and everything. They're taking this DNA, they're taking it back to another planet where humanoids are at, and they develop cattle and food for them to eat. And they're doing the same experiment with them as they are with us, but they're not taking the whole animal, they're just taking parts of it so they can copy it and give it to the other humans on other planets. What do you think that theory is, Rick?
Well, I think originally what some of the cattle mutilations were, some were cults, we know that. Some were groups of people, I don't want to offend anybody, they were groups of people who loved beef. And they didn't have beef in their country. And they were trying to find out what some of the best, what made up some of the best beef. And the only way to do that was to do some of the mutilations at the time. Today, that can all be done with genetics. Okay, all we need to do is take a genetic sample. We don't need to cut anything. We don't need to kill anything. We don't need to do anything. And they can actually reproduce a cow in the lab if they had to. They reproduce sheep.
Right.
So as I look at that, I'm saying as an ET issue, why not just take the DNA? Why just not get some DNA? I mean, you can scrape DNA off your cheek. Why not just take the DNA? Why do we need to cut up the cattle?
Maybe
Why
those are
would
the
an
parts.
advanced race need to do that?
Maybe those are the parts they like to eat.
But you can get that out of the DNA.
Yeah, you
You
can
could
reproduce
reproduce
them.
that.
Mhm.
If you're truly advanced more than us, you could reproduce that cow.
Could they be doing a lot of this stuff to fool us, to trick us into thinking? I
That
mean, there's so many smoke screens with this ET thing that we don't know what's real and what's not. We never. I mean, we haven't.
I think that's a distinct possibility. I mean,
Yeah.
like I said, I never say never. Uh, you know, I want to say, as people listen to us, I'm giving you reasons why it's not ET or why it may be ET. But remember, I am saying there is an ET. Okay, I
Mhm.
firmly believe that. I
Right.
believe extraterrestrials exist.
Yes.
I believe they're intelligent. I believe they've been here.
Hmm.
And I believe they still may be among us. I believe they've been here for a long time. And if you came to me 20 years ago, I still would have been somewhat on the fence, but not anymore because I've heard too much and seen too much. Now, when I move ahead, though, I was an information analyst and I did cyber work. My job was to look at a piece of information and find out or determine if it's correct or not. And then I wonder, how can I get around it? How could I fool it? How could I do something different? So as I look at all these cases, I'm doing the same thing. I'm playing devil's advocate. I'm trying to use some inductive reasoning to say why it can be, applying some science along the side. So those are the things that have me stumped. I know they're happening. I can see they're happening. But when it comes to an extraterrestrial presence, which I do believe exists, what's the motive? They don't need to do that. If we don't need to do it, why do they need to do it? Now, you said something interesting that I probably haven't really considered. It could be another form of alien life. Now, what I was told is, and I think I mentioned to you this before, that there's one particular race that's responsible for the Earth. That's the way it works. Now, this isn't like the Jetsons. Am I dating myself when I say the Jetsons? It's not like the Jetsons where
I'm
they
way
get into
before. I'm way before that.
where they get into their spaceship and they come to Earth. No, this is all state sponsored. But my understanding is that there's one race, for whatever reason, is responsible for Earth. And that on occasion there may be poachers that come to Earth and they
Right.
take care of that as quickly as they can. Is that a possibility? Could that be real? Yeah, I think it's within the realm of possibility. Well, I mean, we're way out there anyway, Dave. So
Yeah.
we're that far out. Why not, go a little farther?
Yeah.
But then I step back, and if you spend any, and I've been the last couple years, and I'm by no means a scientist, but looking and studying this quantum theory stuff, and I was very happy when I'm not the brightest guy in the world, but I can understand stuff. When I talk to a scientist and he says, "You don't understand all of that?" I said, "I don't." He goes, "Good, nobody does." He goes, "Anybody, even quantum scientists, if they say they understand all of it, they don't." We're dealing in a partial metaphysical world with quantum science because we're not there yet. Quantum theory, we're building quantum computers, so we understand that much. We understand certain quantum mechanics, but there's so much more of it in terms of energy flow, the quantum entanglement, all that type of stuff that
Right.
we don't know yet.
Yeah.
So,
I know Mikio Pacquiao, whatever his name is. I get it mixed up, but he always talks about that. I want to take you back when you said there's probably one race that is responsible for this planet. Who do you think that race is? I've heard numbers from 3.5 million years ago that we've been here and gone, been here and gone, been here and gone, from one catastrophe to another, and we've been wiped out many times. Who do you think has brought us here, and who do you think is our caretakers, Rick?
well, I've heard the same thing. I've heard that there's been three or four, I forgot what they call them, epochs before us.
Hmm.
The Earth is 4.5 million years old, 4.5 billion years old,
Right.
and they said that this has gone around three times, and that's a quote that was given to me by somebody who said they read that. Um, they said that the people that are here are, if you go back to the Anunnaki, you can see that they're mostly humanoid types.
Hmm.
Okay, and that's what I believe it is. It's more the humanoid type, just like us, and that's what starts to lead you to believe that it may be ancestral here. We may be dealing with some type of ancestral being. We're part of this. I don't know. You can't see behind me, but I have a couple of ancient things behind me, and one is um, um, a little seal, and it's Sumerian. And when you
Hmm.
roll the seal out, you see the little fairies. And those fairies supposedly are in the company of a tall humanoid like us.
Right.
And the fairies supposedly were builders. And this is what the Sumerians believed. That's where I am. I am.
Are you talking about the little itty bitty fairies, or are you talking about
They're
fairies
not.
that are,
They're not itsy bitsy. I'm going to say like like this.
yeah,
They're not itsy bitsy tiny, and they don't look like fairies. They look a lot like they have the little hats on. You wouldn't be able to see it if I showed you, but they may be stylized for all I know. I don't know, but it's the it's the humanoids. You'll also notice if you go back in some historical stuff, you'll see humanoids, and the Greys are always in the company of humanoid.
mhm.
We even hear abduction stories where they see a humanoid like us, but then the Greys are there.
Right. The tall Nordics or the tall white.
Right,
Yeah.
and that's what we're talking about, and that the Greys are machines, and that's why they're insensitive to human suffering. They're a machine, not as we would define a machine, but as an advanced race would define a machine, and that's what you saw. Now that brings up something in my mind, and you know how I wander sometime, but everybody's talking about AI today.
Yeah.
Okay,
I want
where's
to
it
bring
going?
that up. Yeah. Mhm.
I wrote a paper. Oh, this was 2 or 3 years ago, and the paper was: Have Greys reached alien singularity? Have the Greys, who were created, I believe, by an advanced race, have they gotten to the point where they have outperformed that race? They don't need them anymore. They're an intelligence in themselves because they're basically a living being as we understand it. They were created and they were built out of stuff that we're starting to use today. We have 3D printers to print skin and organs, but now they're evolved beyond that. Just like we're concerned that AI might do at some point. Is that possible? I think it probably is.
Mhm.
So I don't
I've
know.
yeah, I've heard a lot about that. I saw a little gray next to my bed one time, and it was dark in the room, so I couldn't really make out his real color. I know it was dark. He had dark gray or green, kind of like a color to him, and he was really wrinkled up, and he had big eyes like ours, and he didn't have the black lenses on, of course, because it was probably dark. The light wasn't hurting his eyes, so he he was there, and I looked at him, and I thought fear for a while. And then all of a sudden I was just out, just went out and put me out. So uh, that that was a conscious situation where I saw who it was, and apparently this thing wanted me to see it. Getting back to that, I think they want us to know certain things when they're wanting us to understand, I guess, consciousness. They're wanting us to get the idea that that telepathic thing that you're talking about. They're wanting us to know about that. And the other thing too, I think they're wanting people like you and I to keep talking about them, so we can prepare the rest of the people, that are not believers at this point. But we're here to try to help them believe or be enlightened, as they say. And I don't know if I've asked you this, Rick, but have you had a close encounter with yourself? Have you seen anything that really flipped you over?
No, no. The closest thing that I consider that I think I've seen are the shadow people. I think I may have seen shadow people. My wife believes she has, um, but I don't know for sure because right away you try and rationalize it. You try and you look and see what it really was. But I have seen dark shapes in the night. I have heard noises where I know I'm awake. Um, we had a dog, and he passed away a number of years ago. And I've told my son this, and when he's in the house, he said, "Well, I've heard the same thing." He made a noise when he slept. They make that little noise.
Right.
I've heard it. And he was also a smaller dog, so when he ran down the stairs, he would make a noise. And I swear I've heard that. I sit up right away. Am I awake? Am I asleep? So I've heard things like that. I've seen dark shadows they weren't threatening in any way. Now, have you ever heard the concept of hitchhikers?
Yeah.
Okay. You hear that a lot with hauntings.
Yeah, ghost investigators have that. Yeah.
Yeah, but you can have the same thing with extraterrestrials. You can have a hitchhiker. And again, somebody asked me, are they a threat to human beings? I don't believe they are. They've been here so long. If they wanted to do something, they would have done something a long time ago. I do not believe they're a threat to us in any way. Now, if you believe that they're doing certain things to us, and that's frightening, that's another angle, but in everything that I've dealt with, I haven't. I'm still on that motive thing, Dave. Why? And the only answer is like you're saying is they want us to know for some reason, and then that to me means that sounds like an experiment,
Right.
right?
They're all invisible. Angels are invisible until they want to make themselves materialize. Uh, I'd like to ask about this military thing and about people who might be researchers and scientists who might already know how to go invisible or cloak themselves.
It's,
I
it's
know, I know extraterrestrials are invisible because they can come in your house and
I,
do
I was
anything.
I was just looking it up the other day. How far we've gotten along. There is already an invisibility cloak. A couple of companies make them, and they look like almost like a thin sheet of. The best I can say is that they look like a thin sheet of plexiglass, but they're more flexible than that. You wrap them around you, and you're not even there. But right here, I have this sheet here. This is one of a list of the projects that were done in the AATIP project, Advanced
Mhm.
Aerospace Threat Identification Project. And right here I have invisibility cloaking, University of St. Andrews, and the product is classified. Okay, and this was from what, 2012?
Mhm.
So where are we now?
Yeah, nobody tells us.
I mean, there was a speech, and again, politics aside, there was a speech that Donald Trump made. He was making it to a group of some Air Force officers. I think it was televised, and he was really rah-rahing it up. He was getting excited being with them, and he ended the sentence by saying, "We even have aircraft you can't see." And then it ended. He ended it real quick right there. And I've been told that for a couple of years now, and I haven't been involved for many, many, many years. But I was told by some people I know that I wouldn't believe what's possible today by making things functionally invisible. I mean, we know we can make them electronically invisible. We know we can make soldiers invisible. Who knows? That's a distinct possibility. I mean, they say that using different electromagnetic waves, temperatures, you can create screens of invisibility.
Yeah, like the Philadelphia Project in 1943. That whole ship disappeared apparently through, I guess they used magnetic energy to do
Yeah,
that.
which would be probably electromagnetic field. Yeah,
Yeah.
because to use magnetics, you're going to run some type of a charge into something, and especially if metal's around, you're going to create a magnet.
Okay, here's something that's really deep, and I'm writing a sci-fi book, and I talk a lot about dematerializing a ship that can actually dematerialize and go into the side of a mountain. Actually, people have seen that. They've seen UFOs
I've heard that.
go into sides of mountains, and what they're doing is dematerializing and going through solid matter, and then coming into, I guess, an empty space, and then materializing back. That part of that's in my sci-fi book, and then I thought that's a crazy idea, but I thought there's been people who've actually seen that.
Now, I have heard the same thing. And then the question, and this is stuff I start to think about. And as we get into certain things, and if we truly have a multi-dimensional world, have they just gone into the mountain using one dimension into another? The old story about dimensions used to be you have two skyscrapers side by side, and you're standing at the top of one skyscraper, and you want to go to the top of the other skyscraper. And what you have to do is you have to go all the way down to the bottom floor, go over to the next skyscraper, take the elevator, and go to the top.
mm-hmm.
But if we could control the dimensions, all you have to do is step from one skyscraper to the other. Okay? Because you would cross dimensions at some point. So when you hear stuff like that and we say, wow, is that even possible? It can't be. It can't be. But wait a minute. Maybe it is scientific. Maybe it is a form of dimensional travel where we use one dimension to cross to another one. So we go out of one dimension, we go out of the dimension we're in, into another dimension, and then back into our own dimension once we get inside. Is that possible?
Yeah.
Quantum physics says it is.
Well, there's been movies made up. There's one movie you're talking about. It's called Jumpers. They jump from one place to another, and they're doing it dimensionally. Then there is also another movie that I really like. It's called The Judgment Bureau, and they actually can open the door and then they're into another building or they're into another part of the city right away. And all these guys wore these hats, and they were actually, and it sounded like to me like the lead guy was God, or he was part of God or whatever, and that they didn't want this guy marrying this one gal, so they tried to change him and change the timeline and everything, and they had all these agents working, and this was like a dimensional. These were dimensional beings, or men in black. Uh, Now I know that they're invisible because I know they've been in my house and they've been invisible because I picked them up on infrared. What do you know about that, Red? Can you pick up invisibility with infrared cameras?
And some you can. It depends on the technique being used. Um, I think you could do that. I think infrared could do it. Some people have said they can even do it with motion detectors or magnetometers, that type of thing, where they can detect movement. I think this is all possible. I'm working on a paper which I don't even understand what I'm doing yet. I call it quantum drift theory. And what that theory is it starts with the fact that everything is made of energy. Everything, us, the universe, everything is energy. We have energy. We have spots where we don't see energy. That's dark matter. That's energy. Everything is made up of energy, and whether it be strings or loops or whatever, everything is made of energy, and that includes the dimension. That includes what's in the dimension. And if we have all these dimensions and they're moving and they go next to each other, they can cross over each other. Some they can overlap. And we are energy, and we can pass energy from one dimension to the next. However that happens, we don't know what it is yet. All this could be possible. Now, maybe one dimension doesn't require what we have as human bodies. Maybe it's just a consciousness. Other dimensions may require something else. But there may be dimensions that we can actually pass through, and maybe that's what interstellar travel is about. And the things you're talking about, all that could be a dimensional situation or circumstance.
Right.
And once we start to believe in that or understand that, and if that's actually possible with the energy, it starts to almost make sense. And that's when I stop writing and I'm saying, wait a minute, this is starting to make sense, and it really can't make sense. But
So let me give you a plug on your writing. What are you writing these essays or these papers for? What are they be publications or
I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet. What I'm going to do is when I get done with it, I'm going to show some people. I'm going to show it to some people who are smarter than I am. Some of it I've already showed to somebody, and he said, I just never thought of it that way. I just never thought of that. And he said that was really, I was so proud of it. I had to show my wife because I got to know it. And he said, it's brilliant. I showed it to my wife, and she goes, what's he been drinking? And I said, I just always think of something backwards. It's like somebody told me that once. You need to explain to people what you're thinking because you tend to look at it from the opposite side. I said, all right, I'll remember that. I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet. I'm going to wait and see how much sense it makes and show it to some people smarter than I am. And I think in the end, what I would do is give it to somebody who's smarter than I am and say, can you do something with this? Can we prove something with this? I don't think we can. One comment that I made to somebody is, I don't think mathematics is going to give us an answer here. Mathematics is good for the standard model of physics that Einstein knows, because that's a stable model. Then we have quantum physics, which isn't stable. It's like this. So you have this and you have stable. Maybe this is the balance for this. Yeah. The yin and the yang. Yeah, right. And maybe that's the way it's supposed to be. There may not be a unified theory, but a unifying theory. And somebody said, well, yeah, you're crazy, but I don't know. So I don't know what I'm going to do with that stuff yet. I'm going to wait and see if it makes any sense. But like I said, like you mentioned, I've been doing this for 55 years, and I've been listening to stories and hearing things, and I never say never. I've seen some pretty odd things. I've seen some things I can explain. But when I start to cross from the spiritual to science, and this is what we can do, it starts to make a lot of sense to me. And I've always wondered that about hauntings. I've always said that. We're not looking at something that's spiritual. We're looking at something that's science that we don't understand.
It's an energy, yeah.
It's an energy. It's another dimension. We cross it. It crosses us. Maybe Skinwalker Ranch is where some of that energy is crossing.
There was a scientist I'm sorry to interrupt you, Rick, but there's a scientist that told me, and I had a picture here a while back of a mantis being that actually was dimensional, and then the camera picked it up. And there's a lot of people who said, I was really surprised by most people saw what was really in the picture. Sometimes you say, I don't see anything. You know, a lot of these,
I saw your picture. Yeah.
yeah, these trolls and everything else, they see these things and they'll fight with you and argue with you. And they'll say, well, it's the lens. You needed a 0.5055 lens. I don't know what a 0.055 lens is. I just take a picture and it comes out that way. But, you know, what we're seeing, like you're saying, they're coming from other dimensions and they're coming into us invisible in a way. And they're coming in at frequencies we can't see. Is that right, Rick?
Well, that's true. I mean, there's a lot of frequencies of colors we don't see. And there's a lot of frequencies of sound we don't hear. And that's all it's all very possible. I mean, again, can we prove any of this? No. But that's why I like to bring up some of the sciences, because I can't prove it with that science, but in some cases it's very close. And like with extraterrestrials, if we can do it, isn't it possible an advanced race could have done it? And I think when we start to talk about dimensions, I firmly believe they do exist. I believe there's a lot of different things that we don't understand. We're just starting to understand. We don't understand anything yet. So, yeah, I believe that a good answer could be dimensional space. Quantum theory has room in it for dimensional space. So maybe we're going to learn something here. And I think when we do things like hauntings, some of the paranormal, some of the extraterrestrial, I think we're going to start to be able to explain some of this in terms we can kind of understand. I don't know that we're ready to understand all of this yet.
Right. I know we're trying to put together, there's a whole, you know, there's 5 or 6 things I mentioned a while ago, like ghosts and poltergeists. Poltergeists are the physical ghosts. What do you think? Are they coming through dimensional? Are they more physical than the ghosts are in a more material form? Rick?
I think they're a stronger form of energy. And like I said, different dimensions may require different forms of energy. Okay. I was told, and this upset my wife, I was told that we're all made of energy and our consciousness is basically energy, which I can understand that. And that when you pass on, you move to another dimension, let's say, where the body isn't needed. It's just the conscious energy that needs to be there, because we're all energy. At the same time, not everybody has the energy that's going to make it. And my wife said, did they say what dictates that? No, they did not.
What do you mean? Could you explain that a little bit more, Rick?
Some of us will make that jump to the next dimension, and some of us won't. It'll end somewhere. Now, I don't believe everything ends completely, because if you look at nature, we have cycles everywhere. Cycles of the planets, cycle of the seasons, cycles, even stars, when they die, they become something else. But and again, like I said, I talked to people who said they've seen this information, they've seen it written down. Even for them, it's hard to understand. What I understood them to say was that we all have an energy. And will our energies all pass to the next realm, to the next dimension? And the answer was no, not all of it will, because it's not strong enough, or it's not. That's what I understood to mean, not strong enough. Now, it could mean something else, and maybe it goes somewhere else, but that's what they said. And that scared my wife. She goes, does that mean that it might be the end for some people? I said, that's what they're saying. I said, don't take it to heart, calm down. It's just something that was said, maybe something that we don't completely understand. They said a few other things that we don't completely understand. And it's interesting. One other thing they said that we don't understand is, in order to travel through space, you have to slow down instead of speed up. Because you need to be able to slow. It's like going past a fence at high speed. You can't see the breaks in the fence until you slow down. Quantum theory, quantum physics kind of suggests the same thing. At a smaller level, everything slows. Okay, because it's reaching the speed of light. I guess maybe that's part of it. I don't know. This is where I get confused. But you actually slow, and now you can move through different places. Is that possible? Smarter people than me are going to have to figure it out. Right. It's just stuff that I continue to hear.
My thoughts were that you have to, and this is a biblical thing too. They say, keep your spiritual, positive. Keep positive. Keep your energy up, and always be loving and kind. And that'll raise your consciousness. And consciousness is the key word to, I guess, travel. Maybe we won't go as high there's probably multitudes of dimensions, and you mentioned that, you alluded to that a while ago.
Constant, yeah.
And the more power you have, it's like a rocket ship. If it's loaded with a lot of fuel, it's going to go a long way. And if you don't have that energy to go, you'll go to maybe the fourth or fifth dimension, and you won't go to the other higher dimensions. Does that make any sense?
I think it does, and I think when you think of dimensions, we can't, like I show this little cube that I have here,
Mhm.
and it shows like pieces. I don't think they're actually like that. I think dimensions overlap, interlace, and they do all kinds of. They're just there. Some are invisible, some aren't. And they can overlap each other, and we can pass into those because it's just energy, and we're just energy. I had a friend of mine. He was a priest, and I remember in school I was taught God always is and always was. And you said, well, how can that be? And I said to him once, I said, well, what I understand to be the most purest energy is light energy.
Yeah.
It's the purest energy. Now, the thing with light energy is there's no such thing as space and time, okay, for light energy, because light is the speed of light. It's just there. Now, if you had something that exists at that level, then there never was a was, and there never will be a future, and there is an always was. I said, is that what God can be? And he goes, you're catching on. I said, all right. So for anything that travels, time stops, supposedly, when you reach the speed of light. So you always can be, and you always were, because there is no time.
That's what they called Jesus Christ. He was a light being. And some of the disciples actually said he was up on this mountain. They walked up this mountain. I think it was Peter, his James, and I think Thomas, and a couple others that went with him. And he went up and raised his arms up, and he turned into a bright light. I mean, his whole body was a bright light, and like he was communicating with something above. And they said they were amazed at that he turned into just a bright light. His arms and his whole body was just nothing but light. He was a light being. If there was an ET, if he was an ET, that's what he was. That's the,
I've heard people reconsider halos as possibly the essence of these people as energy. Is that possible? All this, if you walk down the street and you talk about this out of context, it all sounds very unusual and impossible. But if you start to think about it for a little while, that there's a lot out there that we don't understand, that the possibilities of dimensions not only can exist, but they probably do exist. Many scientists believe that now. Mm-hmm. And you figure that they are energy based. Everything is energy based. I mean, we're 100 watts. We run on 100 watts anyway, as human beings. This starts to make a little bit more sense. It's a little easier to talk about. Just like when you start to say, and I try to explain this to people, before you get all shook up, consider for a moment that an extraterrestrial could be somebody just like us, about 1,000 years advanced. Mm-hmm. All right. They're doing the same things we're doing today, going to Mars, going to the moon. We want to go here. They're exploring. The old movie, and many people have never seen it because it was based on a play with Jerry Lewis. It was called Visit to a Small Planet. Have you ever seen that?
Yeah, I did. I can't remember all the details, but yeah.
I was able to get a video of it. Very hard to get. But the basis there was he was an alien studying Earth. That was part of his studies wherever he was from.
Yeah, okay, now.
And then he came here to actually experience it. Mm-hmm. Is that so far-fetched?
No. And what about time travel, Rick? I mean, I've been beamed down a couple of futuristic, I guess you would call them downloads from these ETs, whatever. I saw this craft, and the next night I had a dream about the plant closing, and everybody was building it up because they're putting money into it. And I thought, okay, they said I was crazy because I had this dream that the plant was closed, and it was closing. And 3 or 4 months later, it did close. It shocked everybody. And so I think they see time. They know where we're going to be in the next 100 years or 500 years. Do you think they have a mastered time travel, these ETs?
I've seen a number of articles in the last few months where scientists believe that traveling faster than the speed of light is possible. Okay, we're starting to think about that. So I'm thinking if we can do it, they can do it. Why
Right.
not? I mean, there's the and what you have to remember too that time is a human construct. Time wouldn't exist without us. Okay, we created time to measure days and nights and months and all that. I mean, out in space and in nature, time doesn't mean anything. It is what it is. You have to think about that for a while, but time is a human construct.
Mhm.
But obviously, things exist out there on some type of linear basis, I guess, on a progressional basis. A star becomes a star, lasts for a certain amount of time, then collapses. I guess that's time, but we're the only ones that measure time as human beings, as far as we know.
Right.
Okay. So, yeah, I think, can we travel faster than the speed of light? Well, how can you be there before you're there? I don't know. There was an experiment done the other day. I was trying to find it because I wanted to tell you about it. It had to do with photons and the speed of photons, which is the speed of light. And I can't remember the whole article. I wanted to find it to tell you about it. But basically, they said they could go back in time using something where, and they describe it as if you look in a mirror, you're standing there, but then you turn and you look in the mirror, but you can still see the back of your head
Okay.
because the photons in time are still available. And this, again, is quantum theory.
Mhm.
Okay. It's also part of what's called the holographic theory of the universe.
I was waiting for you to get into the holographic and the matrix part of
Okay.
our lives here on Earth, Rick.
Okay. Now
Yeah.
that needs to be explained.
Okay.
And,
Yeah.
and and I had the same thing with my son. My son is a film producer and director, and he can do it all. Cameras, he can do everything. And he goes, "We all live in a matrix." I said, "No, that's not what they said. What they said, there's a doctor out there, Dr. Talbot. I believe he's from Great Britain, but I think he explained it best. We do not live in a hologram, but the universe behaves like a hologram." Okay, in a hologram, if you take a real hologram, not the things you buy at the store in the little glass things.
Mhm.
In a real hologram, you take a picture, you use lasers, and you take a photograph of something. When you develop that film, all you see is a bunch of squiggles on the film. You can't see anything there until you shine a laser on it, and now you see the image. Let's say you took a picture of a flower. Now you see the whole flower. You can turn it around, you can take a look at it. If you take that film and you cut it in half, take a little piece of it, and you shine a laser on it, you know what you see? The whole flower.
There was an old movie back in the 50s. It was called The Angry Planet or something like that.
Okay.
When they fired their lasers at these monsters or these big beings, they could see them, but they couldn't see them otherwise.
The thing is, yeah, even though you only have one piece, you can see the whole flower.
Yeah.
Now, in most pictures, if you cut it, you'd only see the stem of the rose or the top of the rose, but you see the whole rose. And what they're trying to explain is that's the way the universe is. It's a giant, it works like a hologram. So we could, if we had the knowledge, we could take a piece of the universe, look at it, and see everything within the universe. Now, is that the Akashic record? Universal consciousness? Now you're going again into, metaphysics, which people believe to be true, and all of a sudden, that can be true.
Mm-hmm.
Are we tapping into something called the Akashic record, universal consciousness? Holograms suggest we could be. Is that possible?
Okay, where is the location? I know I talked to other guests about the Akashic records. Could you maybe tell us what you know about the Akashic records and how people can even maybe get to them or open them up in their minds or their consciousness, Rick?
Well, that's interesting because I think Einstein believed, he didn't call it the Akashic record, but he called it some type of, he talked about the unifying theory, but he talked about that everything is tied together. And Einstein told a story on how do you get these ideas? And he said how he got these ideas is, when you're not asleep, but you're almost asleep. Yes. And you think of things. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I've thought of answers to things I've been trying to solve. When I wake up, I can't remember it. But he said what he used to do is he used to sit there and he used to, like one time he pretended like he was on the point of light and he was traveling through the universe. And that's how he came up with some of these ideas. And it was suggested to him that maybe you were tapping into some universal consciousness. And he didn't dispute that. He didn't know, but he didn't dispute that. The concept is that if consciousness is energy, and we all have consciousness, and within our consciousness is knowledge. Call it the force, call it universal consciousness, call it anything you want. It's all out there. The question is, can we tap into it? And the question comes up is, did people like Einstein, did people like Tesla, did they have the ability to tap into this universal library of all knowledge? Okay, the quantum theory. In quantum theory, you have the uncertainty principle. And what that says is that you have a piece of matter. Let me put it this way. You have a dime. And in quantum theory, a dime can be both heads and tails at the same time. At the same time. It's until it's observed that it becomes either head or it becomes either tail. And one of the theories is that all time exists in energy. Everything, the future, the past, it's all there. It's a matter of how it's accessed, and it all gets very confusing. But if this is true, then it is possible that a state of matter can be all states at once until it's observed.
I heard this put simple some years back, and I think some old timers told me about it. They asked a question. They said, "Hey, son, do you think if nobody's around to hear a tree crash in the wilderness, does it really make a noise?" And I'm sitting there thinking, what's he getting at? I thought, what is he getting at, Rick? I mean, does it make a noise if nobody's near it?
And I've wondered that too, is when a tree falls, does it displace anything? It does. So it displaces and there's waves and whatever, but until it strikes an eardrum, is there a sound?
Yeah.
Who knows? But this theory says that all time exists at once. It's not until we encounter it that we know what it is. Now, it's easy to understand with the dime, okay? You can understand that, but how it would affect consciousness, it's hard to say. It's like people make a decision on something, okay? And they could go left or they could go right. They know which it is, but until they make a decision, there's no such thing as left or right, okay? It gets very convoluted. But the point being is when you start to hear these things, and I'm probably not explaining them as clearly as they can, then a lot of things that have been said in the past are impossible start to become possible. I remember, maybe it was Hynek, maybe it was somebody else who said, what you're seeing up there, the spacecraft isn't, or the UFO isn't traveling so fast, it winks out and winks back in because it's winking out into one dimension and returning back from that dimension in a different location.
Right. I can understand that.
And that, I mean, that's from the 70s that he had that idea. Right. And I think a lot of us didn't quite understand what he was talking about. And now maybe, I mean, all this stuff sounds so far out.
Right.
But a lot of it, I mean, quantum entanglement, all that, that's for real. Quantum computing is for real.
What about, let me ask you this question. I know we have a lot where they talk about cryptids, Bigfoot, everything else.
Yep.
Could these creatures be coming from another dimension and coming here and starting to thrive? Or are they coming and going, Rick?
I don't know. I believe firmly that Bigfoot existed probably as late as 40, 50 years ago. And I believe they were a very real creature. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is all the giants they found in caves in California and bones and that type of thing. And then I was told a story by an Army officer that I knew that was on a training mission where they had to go from point A to point B. They'd have to go through towns, but they couldn't let anybody know who they were. They traveled through some of the mountains in Northern California. And long story short, they spotted one. At first they thought it was a bear, but then they watched it for a while, and they spotted one. And he said, I have no doubt in my mind that that was Bigfoot. You know, and the question was, well, why didn't you follow it? Well, if we followed it, we wouldn't have gotten back in time. We wouldn't have qualified. we didn't want to tell anybody about it because if it was real, a bunch of people might go out there and just kill it, and then our superiors may think we were nuts. But they said when we did talk to some other people, they saw the same thing. And he said, I still have my notes. He goes from that trip where I made notes on what this thing was and size and all that other stuff. So
Yeah.
I believe they existed. Now, are they alien? Are they not? I think they were more terrestrial than alien. I think they were very real creatures that existed. There are maps, if you can find them. I think it's the early 1800s that still had information on it about the giants in southeastern, where you live, in southeastern United States, and some in the western United States, and they were identified on the maps. And a lot of those maps now have been lost or they're gone, but they were in there.
Yeah, and it's like the Smithsonian would come and pick up bones, giants' bones and everything, and they'd take them from these towns.
Yeah.
They wouldn't let people have them. What were they trying to hide? Nobody really knows. I think there's been top secret stuff going on. Our history is not what we think it is.
Our history is not at all what we think it is.
Yeah.
Something as simple as the American Revolution is not taught properly. I have a friend who's an expert on it, and he goes, you realize that during the American Revolution, 1/3 of the population wanted to separate from England, 1/3 of the population wanted to stay with England, and then there was 1/3 who could really care less which way we went.
Mm-hmm.
But when you hear the story, just like everybody wanted to separate, it wasn't quite like that. Well, in the end, they probably did the right thing, but we're taught things that are different, and I don't know why it's done that way. But
rewrite history. That's
and then some parts of history aren't even taught anymore.
Right.
They don't really teach much about World War II anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to expend at least a couple of classes on that, but they don't teach it anymore.
Okay, we talk about, finish up here on dimensions and dimensional travel. We didn't use the word a while ago, and I want to use it and see what you think. Reincarnation, Rick, what do you think? Could that be possible?
Reincarnation. Where is my page? I just wrote an article on reincarnation. Right now, there is no conclusive. Some people say there's no evidence at all for reincarnation, although a lot of religions believe in it. A lot of people would say it doesn't exist. And I don't know where I put it. I got a paper here somewhere. I just wrote it just the other day because I had to do a class. And my feeling was that if my theory that we're all energy exists, I don't know that we are reincarnated, but I believe that we go on. Okay? What would be the purpose of coming back and doing the same thing over again?
Do we remember our past lives?
Well, they're saying that some people do, and they've mentioned children that remember things that happened in the past, and they can't prove why they know it or how they know it. So I guess it's possible. I believe more, though, that our energy passes on to another state, remaining the energy. I believe that our energy, all of us, existed since the beginning of time. We were out there somewhere.
Yes, I think so.
We were out there somewhere doing something that we don't understand, and at some point we came around to this reality, and we're going to spend some time in this reality, and we're going to move on to another one.
Right.
I firmly believe that, and that makes a certain amount of sense. If you look at the universe, you look at cosmology and what it says about the universe, I think that makes sense.
What about the theory, and there's a lot of people who raise this theory about ETs, extraterrestrials, they are us in the future. Do you believe that too, Rick?
Yeah. I believe that we are the ETs of the future. We are going to do to some other planet, to some other race, what we're doing, what is being done to us here. I believe that. Now, the other thing says we are the ETs coming back. If everything I believe in terms of dimensional travel is true, then I can't deny that. I can't argue against it. I believe the ETs we see today are our ancestors. I believe we will do the same thing to somebody else. We're already starting to do it out in the space at some point. See, it's all possible. See, I can't really argue against it because I just said that I believe these dimensions are possible. And if that's the case, then sure, it could be. And if all this other theory is correct, that all states of matter exist all at one time, and time can exist all at one time, It really becomes a matter of having the knowledge to be able to manipulate it, like anything else.
Yeah, we live in
Like
the present and future all at once, right?
it's right, and like stealth, for example, back in the 70s, one of the big explanations for UFOs is there was no UFO there because we didn't get it on radar. Well, we now know that that doesn't matter because some of our own planes can't be seen on radar. And that was interesting in the 70s because that's when they were first starting with stealth. So the military knew that it was possible perhaps to hide something off of radar, but that was a big reason to explain that it didn't exist, is because it wasn't on radar. And we know that's not true anymore.
Okay, we're getting into the final few minutes, and I want to ask you about where we heading. I know you have UFO UAP investigation office, ARROW, and you've studied a lot of this, and you've been involved with the government. Where is disclosure, and why is it coming out now? And what's their objective with it, Rick? Do you know?
I don't think it is coming out. I'm very disappointed. I've written many times. This is Project Blue Book version 2.0. There is, so now we have AAOs, all domain anomalies. Okay. Now you can break those AAOs down into UAPs, which is unidentified aerial phenomenon, or you can call them transmedium, which would be in the ocean, let's say, and then in the air, or unidentified submerged objects. But UFOs and UAPs are not the same. I firmly believe that. A UAP is an unidentified aerial phenomenon.
Yeah.
A UFO goes beyond that. A UAP could be a balloon. It could be something like somebody's science project that we shoot down with a $400,000 missile.
Is that why the Pentagon changed the name from UFO to UAP?
I think so. And I've talked to pilots, and they said, you get to a point when you say, wait a minute, that's a UFO. It's an unidentified flying object. It's not an aerial phenomenon. We know it's an object. We don't know what it is. And I believe that the UFOs will always be talked about in certain circles as the non-terrestrial stuff. Now, how much of it there is, I don't know. And the UAPs, really what they're focused on is foreign adversary. They're looking at drones. They're looking at surveillance technology. That's really what this office is after. Okay. Yeah. The other day, I listened to Sean Kirkpatrick testify. He took a shot at UFO researchers, pretty much saying these people who are avocational UFO researchers really stop and submit, if they want to do this, submit their work to respected journals and go that route. That kind of bothered me a little bit because some of these people have the same credentials he has. And oh, by the way, those journals that you're submitting this information to are the same journals that subscribe to the theory that if it can't be defined by our science, it can't exist. And we know that's wrong. Mm-hmm. So you're gaining nothing. You're also avoiding or dismissing what we call disruptive innovation. And there's been a number of papers out on that lately, that we have a lack of disruptive innovation or disruptive science. And what disruptive science is any science that challenges existing science. But what they wrote in this paper is too many people get grants going with the status quo. Too many people get published going with the status quo. So they don't really want to, rock the boat here. But we need to get back to some disruptive science. And that's what we're talking about here. Now, maybe everything we talked about here is completely wrong. Maybe we're all just crazy.
And we're going to have to rewrite everything, yeah.
but if it causes one person to think about it, if it causes one really smart kid down in a garage somewhere to put something together that we've never seen before, and that's how it always happens, then it's worth it.
Right.
All right.
Well, we're going to have to close the show. We're going into the last minute or two, Rick, and it's been great talking to you. I remember last time I talked to you, full of a lot of knowledge and a lot of thoughts and not necessarily opinions. You research a lot of this. Tell us a little bit where we can locate you on the internet.
The best place that I have my you can go to my web page, my Facebook page, which I think is Facebook.com. I should know this, right? Facebook.com/ET UFO info. That's my Facebook page for me. And then I have my book page where I write all my articles, which is Facebook.com/ET UFO secrets.
Great.
So they're both the same, but one is info and one is secrets. And that's where you're going to find most of the articles that I write. If you've looked at, I don't know if you've looked at it, but you can find it. I find a lot of articles, pro and con. Why did we do this? Why aren't we answering this? But that's where you can find out more.
Okay. RJ, Rick Teles, thank you so much. And you've been listening to United Public Radio Network, FM 105.3 and 107.7 Global from beautiful New Orleans. Strange Reality with Dave Emmons, that's the show. And our producer tonight was Joe Montaldo, and it's also called UFO Paranormal Network. And RJ Rick Teles was my guest tonight, and fabulous. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. And everybody who's joined in on the show tonight and listened in, I hope that you've learned something or you've been enlightened. Thank you from all of us here at the network.
Thanks, Dave. It was fun.
Thank you. Thank you, Rick.